Welcome to Real Life. My name is John Greaves, and this is Brad Martin. And Brad, what is it you do? Because every time I describe what you do, you come in and say, "Well, I want you to know. I want you to say it different." So now you get to say it. Go ahead. What do you do?
I teach people how to follow Jesus without having to be involved in organized religion. So that'd be the easiest way I know to say it.
Okay. Well, then that fits with today's question, because one of the things that we do is allow you to ask questions that you made about the Bible and spirituality that you may not have had opportunity to ask before. Today's question is, what does it mean to not forsake assembling yourselves together?
The famous "you got to go to church" verse.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it means some of what you think. It doesn't mean some of what you think. That verse is typically used to tell people that they have to go to church. And by go to church, that means that it is the will of God that all Christians on Sunday go to buildings, church buildings, whether a church is meeting in a school or has built its own building,
right,
and go there and participate in an organized church's events. Well, in America, that means go to a worship service.
It's standard formula. You know.
And that's the minimal. You're supposed to do a lot more than that, but that's the minimal gathering that you're not supposed to forsake. Well, what you need to grasp is a little bit of the background when the author of Hebrews said that. So let me see if I can find. That's in Hebrews chapter 10. And what the author says is this. Therefore, brothers, well, let me skip on down. You see the awkward silence?
This is how you know we didn't rehearse this.
Is it like building the tension or the...
No, it's making me want you to read the...
Oh, you're ready?
I just want you to read the verse.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, here we go. Verse 24. Verse 23 says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our faith, of our hope, without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another." What's going on in the church here in Hebrews is people are beginning to suffer a little bit for the faith. There's beginning to be persecution. And as a result of that persecution, there are believers who are saying, you know what, now that we've become Christians and the Jews are beginning to notice that we're different from them, they're starting to persecute us.
And the Romans are noticing that they're different from Jews
and
also.
That means the persecution is going to get bad. So what some of the people are deciding to do is no longer to gather together with believers on mission to follow Jesus and be fishers of men. Instead, they're saying, instead of doing that, let's go back to the synagogue or the temple and let's just do Jewish religion and lay all this aside. And the author is saying, this, if you go on to read, if you've had God do all this inside of you in Christ, then if you're on that mission with Him, you need to gather together. Okay. And so a basic, if you missed all that, here's how it makes simple. Jesus is saying a basic believer's need is to gather with other believers.
Well, then that begs the question, what would be wrong with them going to the synagogue? I mean, they're still worshiping the same God. Granted, they didn't believe in Jesus as the Messiah, but they're still worshiping the same God. The apostles went to the synagogues. Jesus went to the synagogue. What was wrong with just...
Right. Well, in Hebrews, you're saying they're worshiping the same God. However, what they're actually doing is they were beginning to falter in the faith. Okay. Not worshiping Jesus Christ, not following Jesus. Because the synagogue didn't do that. In other words, if you're going for synagogue worship, it's going to be minus Jesus.
Right.
And so Paul, or I don't know if it's Paul, whoever wrote it, I don't know who wrote it, wrote Hebrews is saying believers need to gather together to encourage one another and stimulate one another to love and good deeds.
So what does that mean for us today?
And for us today, that does not mean that to be a good Christian, you have to be in a church building. Those words are not in the text. In fact, they're not in any text in the Bible. You know why? There was no such thing
as a church building.
As a church building. It's going to be hundreds of years before we get one of those. And so, in their concept, in the New Testament concept, gathering together was finding other like-minded believers who follow Jesus Christ and gather together with them, because you need the interaction, the prayer, the ministry, and the encouragement to stay stimulated to go and do love and good deeds,
right.
To go do the mission. And so I always tell people this: if you don't want to go to church, or you don't want to gather with believers, if you don't want to do the thing, I don't mean show up at a church building. I mean saying, I don't like organized religion to the point I don't even want to gather together with other believers. Let me tell you what you're not on. You're not on a mission.
Right.
You won't meet believers who are following Jesus on a mission to be like Him, who won't look at you and say, I've got to have some friends in Jesus.
Yeah.
I've got to have some other believers to gather with, to celebrate what God's doing, to grow together, and to learn. You can do that as a group at a Starbucks. You can do that as a group in your home. You can do that as a group anywhere you want to do it. The key is to come together and gather together regularly on some basis. Doesn't even have to be every Sunday morning. And encourage one another and stimulate one another to love and good deeds. That's what Hebrews is talking about.
I mean, a practical application of it, I know we've had gatherings at my house where we sat around our fire pit, and essentially, if you want to talk about following life patterns, we were essentially doing the same thing that Paul and Barnabas would have been doing when they went on mission. There was obviously a fire. I'm sure that they talked about their faith. Mm-hmm. We were doing the exact same thing, and it's not like they did it out of necessity. It's that they were, well, if we had a church building, we would go to the church building instead.
Right.
But it's part of being on mission.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that will come to your house won't necessarily go to a church building, and you can reach them there, reach them in that way. That's Absolutely. What Jesus wants us to do, is reach people.
Absolutely. And so, the thing to leave you with is begin to gather with people who are on mission, who are saying, look, I want to share Jesus with the world, because that's what following Jesus is about. Yeah. So you need to make a differentiating between, do you follow Jesus Christ, or are you just a fan of Jesus? Somebody's written a book about that. Okay. I mean, I think I've mentioned this before, but I've never read the book, but boy, it makes sense. We got a lot of people who are fans of Jesus. Those are people sitting up in the stands.
Right.
He did not call those, he's not calling people to that, ever in this book. He calls people to follow Him. And Jesus never says, follow me, I'm going to sit my butt down in the stadium. Nice. And wait somebody else. So, follow Christ, be on mission, and if you are, you're going to want to gather together. And when you do, you don't have to build a building. No. Nothing wrong with buildings, but you don't have to build a building and be strapped with organized religion.
I hope that answers your question. If you have any questions for Brad, you can send an email to me at john@onesoma.net. And while you're at it, check out our website, onesoma.net, and you'll see a lot of the things that we're doing. If you think that this sounds interesting to you, hey, check us out. Come hang out wherever we are. Thank you.